Okay, so good morning. It's nice to be here again today. Today we have lecture number 13, which is the very start of the topic of pitching, which we'll be doing for the next 4 lectures during this month of February 2023. As you might know, we had a little bit of a disaster this morning. For different reasons, for technical reasons, the live stream itself didn't work. It crashed, which wasn't very good. So I've decided to run now to some nearby internet cafe and to do a recording of this. So if you can hear some groovy music in the background, then that's why. This is the only place that has really high-speed internet, and hopefully it's going to work. So what are we going to look at? The topic of pitching. And I suppose to begin with, I should explain what pitching actually means. So I suppose you could look at it from the perspective of American English. In American English, they have baseball. And one of the players in baseball, he is the pitcher. And to pitch means that he throws the ball. In business development, in sales, to pitch means to make a proposal, to make a suggestion, to offer something. And in the legal services industry, we can look at this, I suppose, in terms of 2 types of pitching. And that's what we're going to examine today. The first half of the lecture is going to be about solicited pitching, when a client asks us to make a proposal. Very often this is through something which we might call an RFP, a request for proposal. So they ask us what we can do and how much it's going to cost, and then we tell them. And sometimes, hopefully, we win, like a tender. And then the other type of pitching, the second half of the broadcast, is about unsolicited pitching, or maybe a better term for this would be spontaneous pitching, where you, the lawyer, you come up with the value proposition and you propose it and you suggest it at your initiative. And there are a number of advantages over this compared to solicited pitching, which we're going to look at. Okay, let me change the slides. So yeah, we know what is the early morning show. This is every Thursday morning. I'm thinking that in future it's good for me to actually record versions of the different lectures just in case of technical issues like today. So yeah, we have more engagement and it's more fun, especially the questions and answer part if it's live. But if we can't have the live, then at least it's better to have a recording rather than nothing. Yeah. So, as usual, we're going to have the 16 key concepts, and each of these key concepts has their associated pictogram. The first 8, as you can see, are going to be about solicited pitching, and then the second 8 are going to be about unsolicited pitching. And in the further 3 weekly broadcasts on pitching, we're going to look into a little bit more detail at both of these, and some other related topics, such as taking part in beauty parades, spoken pitching, which is actually quite challenging, and a few other points. This music is quite incredible, very interesting background music. So let's begin by looking at the solicited pitch. And the solicited pitch is actually what most of the law firms are engaged in. A big dirty secret that I can share with you, a remarkable secret actually, is that a lot of firms are not doing anything apart from responding to solicited pitches. So you might have entire legal departments, marketing departments that are engaged in responding to RFPs and putting together the pitch decks and so on. But then if you ask them, do you have any proactive campaign? Do you do unsolicited pitching? The answer is very often, no, not at all. Maybe on an individual basis and on systematic basis, it might be done by some of the lawyers and the partners at their own initiative, but systematically quite not, usually no. So there's a lot of opportunity to move beyond just solicited pitching and also to look at the unsolicited pitching. Still, to begin with, I think another thing that I've noticed with many of the law firms, and let's be honest here, quite often the knowledge management system in the law firm isn't as good as it could be. It is remarkable that even if you look at some of the major international law firms and consultancies, incredible brands, very, very professional. I mustn't name names, but when you actually look at how they are organized internally in terms of responding to RFP requests, it is very often just a mess. You can have the situation where you have different departments, different practices, using different templates, different fonts, different branding. They might be recycling previous pitches they had done, which they thought were good, and they're recycling some of that content for their future pitches, and they're not communicating it. So it's not impossible that even if you come to a large international brand, that you will find very different types of formats and quality and structures of pitches being sent out by different partners and different practices. Of course, this is a very, very, very bad idea. You need to have brand integrity to start. You need to represent your company as one company, not a group of little companies kind of collaborating together. And then all of the different best practices, it means you're not going to have them. It's going to be, there are some good points for some practices, some good points are missed for other practices. So before we look at anything about systematically improving our pitches, you need to make sure that you don't have a foundation of an RFP response mess. This takes a lot of time. So for example, even in terms of resumes, some marketing departments, some lawyers, they might have gathered together a resume for each and every one of the lawyers and the partners. And then you have to format them to be in the same format and the same structure and the same style. This is such a hassle because some people don't want to participate. Some people send a very detailed 3-page resume. Some people send 3 or 4 sentences, and you have to make this all very consistent. So this takes a lot of time. Even worse, like I mentioned before, it's not enough to have one resume per person. If you have a lawyer who can have several hats, maybe they can do competition and they can do corporate and they can do M&A, you actually need to have different resumes reflecting those different capabilities of what they have. The testimonials need to be relevant. They need to be coming from that industry. You need to have the examples of previous work also from that industry. So it can take a ton of time, a ton of effort to have a really good foundation, a knowledge management library. I don't think this should be underestimated. And just because a company has a good brand, don't assume that they're ahead of the game here. I think quite often for small to medium-sized law firms, there's a better chance to be avoiding the RFP response mess than even the internationals. So let's imagine that we've managed to sort out this. We can understand that there are 2 types of pitches. There is the RFP and there is the unsolicited pitch. And I'll just be totally brutally honest with you because we only have like 30 minutes or so for this lecture. Personally, I really do not like RFPs. I do not like solicited pitching. I think an unsolicited pitch where we take the initiative to make a proposal is much, 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 much better. And there are lots of reasons for this. When you receive an RFP, you are one from many. There are other competitors, so your chances of winning are automatically lower. It also means that you are being viewed as one of many, so you're beginning to look like a commodity law firm. Quite often, let's be honest, the main differentiator between who wins and who loses in an RFP is who's cheaper, and there will always be somebody cheaper. You know, I've told you that we don't want to get into price competition and we don't want to get into discounts. This process to respond to some of these RFPs can take so long, so much time, so much effort, and I'm not sure if there's really a return on that investment. Very few of the law firms are tracking, you know, how much time and effort and hours, money do they put into responding to RFPs and what actually comes out of it. A lot of law firms are wasting a ton of time in participating in these basically useless tenders. You can also have unethical practices where you have some parties who have no intention at all of ever hiring your law firm. And what they're doing is what I call phishing. They're looking for free legal advisory, or something shady is going on. They've already decided who they're going to work with, and they just need to make it look a little bit transparent by having some other proposals. So personally, I would not want to participate in a lot of RFPs. Unless I was sure that there's a real big competitive advantage that we're going to win, I wouldn't bother doing it. The opposite is the unsolicited pitch. And keep in mind, guys, this isn't just to new clients. This is to current clients, ex-clients, and it could be for new clients as well. The unsolicited pitch is where you come up with a value proposition and you pitch it and you propose it. The advantage here is you can choose when to do it. With RFPs, you'll get too many of them when you're too busy, when the economy is good, and when you would like them, when the economy is bad, you won't get them. It's the opposite with unsolicited pitches. You can choose when to do them, in which industry, with which product, from which practice. You have a lot of choice. That's absolutely fantastic. With an unsolicited pitch, you don't have other competitors. If you're going to make the next mistake, which is only to be a market-driven law firm, so you wait for something to change in the law, and then you send your unsolicited pitch to your current and ex-clients. That's better than nothing, I suppose, but it means that all the other competitors are going to be doing the same thing. I would even go the step further. Being a market-driven law firm to do unsolicited pitching is bad. You should be purely a spontaneous law firm with unsolicited pitching. So you don't need to wait on what's happening in the legal market, and then you don't have any competitors. Of course, in an unsolicited pitch, it is important not to put all of your cards on the table. You don't give great technical detail about how you guys are going to propose and do this legal issue, so that in-house legal counsel doesn't do it themselves. But as long as you're putting in their teasers rather than spoilers, I think you should be okay. One of the reasons that I really don't like the solicited pitch, the RFP, is that the sender has no investment into this relationship. So if you have a purchasing department and they send out an RFP, that purchasing manager has invested a few seconds to click on send, and he sends it off to 10 different law firms. And then on our side, as lawyers, we need to spend hours putting together the materials, the presentation, getting the research, contacting colleagues, whatever, to send the response. And quite often there might not even be any reply from that purchasing department. So it seems a very unbalanced relationship. I think that if you want to make sure that they're being serious and to rebalance the relationship and increase your chances of actually winning the tender, you need to play with the sunk cost hook. That means that if they want to work with you, they send you an RFP, you then say to them, okay, we need to involve you guys in our know your client process. We need to have a call. We need you to fill in these various forms. We need to have a talk. You need to get them to invest time and effort into the relationship even before it begins, so that you guys can then work together. If they're not willing to do that, it means they really don't care. They have no interest in specifically working with your law firm. They think you're the same as the competitors, and maybe you've got no chance of winning anyway. So I would really play with the sunk cost hook. The more time that they have to invest into preparing and being ready to work with you, the higher the chances are that they will then actually work with you. So I know of some law firms where they request potential clients or those sending an RFP to fill in various documents and forms. Not because it's necessary, but because it shows that these clients are serious, they have good intention, and that it's going to spend them some time, going to take them some time to do this. And therefore, if they don't work with you, they lose all of that invested time. So while you can't change the situation in terms of maybe getting a deposit or financially getting a hook and commitment from a potential client doing an RFP, you can do it with time and effort. That's the sunk cost hook, which means as soon as a lawyer or a partner receives an RFP in their email, the thing that they have to do, and usually nobody does this, you have to pick up the phone and you have to call the sender. I know that there can be some restrictions on this, for example, when working with government bodies. If there are such restrictions, you can't do it. But for commercial entities, you definitely can. So there are 5 reasons to call. The first reason, of course, is, the sunk cost. If they're going to spend half an hour talking to you, then it's in their interest to continue to work with you, because if they don't, they lose that half hour. But there's another 4 reasons to call. The first reason is you can ask questions and get extra information. So then when you do make your RFP response, you have a competitive advantage against the other law firms that didn't call and didn't get that extra information. Secondly, probably very importantly, you build social equity. You build a good relationship with this person. All of the other lawyers on that list are basically just a list of unknown names. You stand out. You become a person. You build a relationship with them. You show them that you are a nice, normal person. I'm sure you are. So that'll increase your chances that they will work with you. You get a feeling for them as well. You can see what are their values and the priorities. You can actually ask them, what's most important. Maybe it's not just about the price. Maybe it's not just about money. Maybe they had some bad experiences in your jurisdiction, so they're afraid of quality. Maybe time is of the essence. Maybe, you ask them, you find out what are your values, what are your priorities, on what basis are you going to choose the winner for this RFP. It might not be written in the document, so you can ask about that. And then lastly, you get a feeling also for them as a person. If they're nice and polite and interested and engaged and asking you questions and serious, you can feel it. If they are rude, abrupt, apathetic, don't want to speak to you, well, I think that also reflects the kind of value and the priorities that they place on your potential relationship. So I would really question if you want to work with them. In fact, I would go with the emotional intelligence enough that if you get a bad vibe, if that person won't speak to you, they're not going to speak to you seriously, don't bother responding to that RFP, quite simply. So again, I repeat, as soon as you get an RFP, the worst possible thing that you can do is to answer it by email. That can be immediately shooting yourself in the foot. The best thing that you can do is 5 reasons to call. You pick up the phone and you call them and you speak to them. Yeah. Because, one of the most dangerous questions that you can be asked in any kind of event, at a networking event, by email, in an RFP, is how much do you cost? How much will it cost to do this? How much will it cost to do that? The worst possible answer is that you tell them. Because as soon as you tell someone your cost, they will position you and they will think that there is someone cheaper, and there is always someone cheaper. And also, by telling someone how much something costs, you haven't built any relationship with them, you haven't asked them any questions, you haven't sold them anything, you haven't persuaded them about anything. So if someone says, how much do you cost? You tell them the answer, you've probably just lost that sale. You mustn't do it. When someone says to you, how much do you cost? How much would it cost to do this or that? You can say to them, I don't know. And they're like, what on earth? How come you don't know? You can say, well, I really need to understand better the bigger picture. What are your needs? What are your priorities? What is it that you actually want to do? And then I can give you a kind of price estimate. This isn't just a bluff from a sales perspective in order to build a relationship with them and get a deeper understanding of their needs. It really is to understand exactly what is the scope and what is it that they want and that they need. Keep in mind, they can be asking you the wrong question. They think they need X. As a matter of fact, they need Y. So this is a catastrophic mistake that a lot of lawyers and partners and law firms make when they respond to RFPs. There's one little slide towards the back of the slide deck which includes pricing. And quite often what happens is, especially if it's a purchasing manager, they get these presentations back from the law firms. They look at that little slide with the pricing and they choose the cheapest. All of that other information, biographies, expertise, testimonials, industry knowledge, ignored, just go down to price. So you need to be very, very careful. I would go as far as saying not to include the standard pricing slide. That you can play around with this a little bit, or you can even leave it out so that they then have to come back to you and speak to you further about it. This is kind of controversial. But if you are going to include the pricing information in that first response, if you have to, it's a good idea to include 3 price positions. So this means rather than say, our offer is going to cost 10,000, you include a downsell, let's say for 5,000, you include a standard for 10,000, and you include an upsell, let's say for 20,000. Because when you receive an RFP, you have very much a dilemma. The lower the price that you offer, the higher the chance that you will win, but the lower your profitability, or maybe no profitability. On the other hand, the more ambitious you are, the higher the price you ask, the smaller your chance that you will get that offer, and therefore get nothing at all. So you can play the system. You don't need to just answer with one price. You answer with 3 of them. And it's not just 3 prices like a discount and a markup. It's a downsell, standard, and an upsell. Let's say they ask about doing a startup in your company, in your country. You could say standard offer for the startup is going to be 10,000. It's a bundled solution. It's the tax advisory about real estate, IP, labor, and so on. It's going to be 10,000. On the other hand, you say for 3,000, we can include our workshop and introduction to legal entities in our jurisdiction to show which of these we would recommend for you to do. This isn't even helping them to start up. You could include a few generic documents and advisory that would work across the different entities, but this is making them aware of the different solutions that could exist. And then, of course, you have the super duper massive upsell option, which is going to cost 20,000, which is with all the bells and whistles, all of the extras, and so on. Now, by doing this, the upsell option desensitizes them to the pricing of the other two. The 5,000 or the 10,000 option doesn't look so expensive when you have a 20,000 upsell beside it. Further, it encourages internal comparison. So if a person is presented with 3 price positions, quite often they simply choose the middle one. And then, you know, if we were in a tender, there are 5 law firms, and we're just one of them, and the other law firms have given 4 numbers, and we've given 3, that means that there are 7 offers. We have a 3 in 7 chance in terms of winning. It increases your winning chances by your 3 price positions. If the client is very price sensitive, they'll go for our downsell. If the client is more interested and has higher value in our services, they have a longer term perspective, maybe even our upsell would win. It will stand out from the others by being the most premium solution. So you can do that. You can include 3 price positions in your RFP response. And apart from that, this isn't the same thing. Apart from that, you can also include, in addition to the 3 price positions, a specific additional upsell clause, an upsell slide. Make the client aware that there are these other increased premium capabilities that you can add. In this upsell clause, this upsell slide, you can also show relevant cross-sell opportunities that, a little bit like Amazon, if someone buys a certain book, Amazon would recommend other buyers also bought. So you can say these are other relevant issues that might arise afterwards. These are some other upsells and cross-sells that could be of relevance for you. You could, in your RFP response, you could even include a back-end offer. You know, what happens afterwards? What are some of the future requirements we predict that your company is going to require? So these would be in the upsell clause slide and the cross-sell clauses in there as well. And then I think it's extremely, extremely important that we don't make the mistake of blind pitches. And what this means is quite often clients hear about our law firm. They send us an RFP. The RFP goes, in this case, you can see the little person, that's a partner. The partner delegates it to the marketing department. Marketing department, they put together the template, they get all of that information, and they send the RFP response out. And maybe we win or maybe we don't. And if we don't, usually nothing is tracked, nothing is done. So this is blind pitching, and this process just continues on and on and on. This is really kind of crazy. What would be much better would be, we say, we're only going to participate in your RFP if you agree that we have a post-tender feedback session, whether we win or not. And if we win, it can be about why we won and what made you choose our firm. And if you don't, it's about why we didn't win. So this is very important so that we can get real, genuine feedback on what's happening with our proposals and our pitches. And if they're not working, then we find out why they're not working. And then I think it's important, I think it's absolutely critical that the marketing department, they be given the autonomy to have that metric of success, which is to increase the success rate of our RFP responses. In most of the law firms, this doesn't happen. I get the feeling that partners, senior lawyers, managing partners quite often just dump this annoying task of making the presentation onto marketing. Marketing puts it together and it's sent off. And we just keep on doing that because somehow blindly some of them succeed. That's really not the best approach to take. If you're not getting better and better at your RFP responses, having an increasing rate of return, it means you're just blindly pitching and competing with all the others. So I think this tender feedback has to be a compulsory part of participating in RFPs at all. Otherwise, you can waste a ton of time doing this for years and years and years. It's not a best practice. Now, let's look at the unsolicited pitch. This is my favorite. This is what I recommend you really, really should be doing. And again, most of the law firms are actually not doing it. To succeed in unsolicited pitching, you need a UVP for the KDM. You need a unique value proposition for the key decision maker. You need to offer something interesting to the big boss. The KDM, they have different names. It could be the CFO, the general director, the founder. Maybe it might be the HR director if it's for employment law. Could be in-house legal counsel, for example, if you were working on some other areas relevant for lawyers and law firms. So you have to pitch something interesting for someone who has the authority, capability, potentially the desire to buy. A lot of lawyers and law firms don't do this. What do they do in pitching? They propose plain vanilla. They talk about wonderful capabilities, expertise, highly qualified lawyers, etc., and etc. And they propose that to middle management. This is really, really a bad idea. If you propose plain vanilla to middle management, you're just basically going to lose. You need to propose a UVP for the KDM. If I was with a team of young lawyers, I would have them stick this above their computers. Only if you have a UVP for a KDM do you have a chance of success. Now, when you do a pitch, there are 4 outcomes of a pitch. You send your proposal, your spontaneous proposal, let's say to a CEO, and for a current client. The good result is that they hire you. That's a success. That's wonderful. We're happy. The opposite can happen. They can fire you. They can say, no, thank you. We don't need it. We don't have budget. Goodbye. That's not the worst that can happen. It happens. It's okay. You move on. You're going to be resilient. However, that would be too easy. In legal services, you can also end up getting an advance, which means they don't say yes. They don't say no, but you're at least in the game. They say, let's come back to you after a month. Let's do a meeting with our general director, next quarter. It means that something has happened. An advance will then become a hire or a fire. So while we love to get a hire, an advance is pretty good as well. And a fire, well, that's disappointing, but it happens. There is a 4th outcome of a pitch, and that's called a continuation. And a continuation is when there's basically silence or nothing happens. And a continuation is much worse than a fire, because you waste time. You're waiting and waiting. You have to do follow-up. You have to chase them. So the worst thing that can happen to you in spontaneous pitching, actually, and in solicited pitching, is going to be continuation. A fire is much better because then you move on. So there are 4 outcomes of a pitch. A hire and an advance are good. Fire and a continuation are bad. Continuation being very, very bad. Now, when you do spontaneous pitching, you have to understand, especially with new clients, that the higher level the key decision maker, the more gatekeepers they will have around them. A gatekeeper is someone whose job it is to keep you out, to keep you away from the key decision maker. So if you approach a small to medium-sized company, the key decision maker will maybe have just one gatekeeper. It'll be their personal assistant, the office manager, in-house legal counsel, whoever. Their job is to keep you away. You have to get through the gatekeeper. On the other hand, if it's a very big, important company, a very powerful key decision maker, then there can be shells and shells of gatekeepers around that key decision maker. They might be like a plutonium atom, for example, rather than a hydrogen atom. So it can be very difficult to get through to key decision makers in larger firms. That's why likely you're going to have more chance of success with unsolicited pitching when you're proposing to small to medium-sized companies, because it's easier to reach the KDM. Despite this, whenever you do business development, especially proactive business development, spontaneous pitching, you have to get through the gatekeeper to the key decision maker. Now, I know in lots of countries there are restrictions on solicitation. So you need to take this advice with a pinch of salt. But the worst thing that you can do is if someone says, yeah, send us your presentation. That's the office manager or the in-house counsel. Send us your proposal. That's going to go straight in the bin. It's going to be deleted. Refuse. You have to get through the gatekeeper and speak to the key decision maker. So if you're contacting a company, you would say to them, You can tell them in legal detail what this is about. They won't understand, so they'll probably just put you through to the key decision maker. So that's intentionally using legalese. A different approach would be to say that it's a highly confidential and important matter. And probably it is. If you have a good value proposition, it should be of quite some significance to the company. And you need to speak to the key decision maker, not a gatekeeper, about it. Quite often, if you simply say that you're a lawyer or a partner from such and such a law firm, you need to speak to such and such a person, they're probably going to let you through. They have no idea why a lawyer is calling. And usually if a lawyer is going to be calling, it's something kind of serious. So don't make the common mistake of pitching or sending information to the wrong person. You have to get to the key decision maker. It's not enough to send off an email or a pitch to somebody, whoever. You've got to send it to the right person. And then when you do send off your pitch, it doesn't matter if it's with an RFP or a spontaneous one, you need to give clients deadlines. You say this offer is valid until such and such a date. This protects you because I've seen the situation where law firms made an offer, client accepted it 6 months or many months later, and the financial situation and the currency situation had changed, and they no longer would have liked to have done that work. So you give clients deadlines. And this also gives you an excuse to chase them and to harass them and remind them that the deadline is approaching. You can decide or not if you're going to really hold that deadline or if it's a bluff. But by giving deadlines on your pitch offers, even if it's spontaneous, you increase the response rate and the conversion rate. An interesting concept as well can be when you have a client meeting, take the pitch with you, might be in a PDF format, and you can make your pitch into a contract. You can have a little box at the bottom where you have signatures. This doesn't have to have any legal weight at all, but this is there to remind you as a lawyer or a partner that you need to try and close. You need to try and get their agreement to proceed further. So that's your objective. Again, most of the time this doesn't happen in these kind of client meetings. What happens is people meet, they talk, let's agree to send each other information later. That's really very, very silly. The most difficult part in a client meeting, in a pitch meeting, is to close, to say, do we have a deal? And you must have the courage, you must have the bravery to actually ask that question. And you need to push for the yes. So that's one way that you can do this, make your pitch in a contract, have them sign there. And if they sign there, it's like a gentleman's agreement. It doesn't have to have any legal weight at all. It might not, but it does have some social weight, especially if there are witnesses. So I don't think this is too pushy at all. Sometimes it's enough to just agree to shake hands. Yes, we have an agreement, and you go with that. Go further, aspire towards making a pitch a contract and getting a signature even. And when you do a whole range of pitching, let's say you've sent off 5 or 6 different pitches, similar value proposition to some current and next clients, you make a follow-up table, just in Excel. Horizontally, you have the time axis, and you track when do these pitches become hires, fires, advances, or continuation. Only with this systematic follow-up, and then knowing the follow-up procedure, when do you email again, when do you call again, when do you follow up to the degree of nuclear option, like we talked about in sales writing, then you can do this to conclusion. If you just do blind pitching and send off 5 pitches and wait and see what happens, your conversion might be, I don't know, 1 in 5. If you do a systematic follow-up table with the follow-up, seeing where the hires, fires, advances, and continuations, so on, you can double or triple your conversion. Again, very few lawyers actually do this, but you should. You need to be a little bit persistent. This is a cute analogy. The hungry cat gets fed. If you follow up, you follow up, you follow up, you have more chance of success. The cat that is chasing you because it's hungry, if you're at home and a hungry cat will not let you work on the computer, they will not let you watch television, they will mew, they will jump. It's very annoying, but eventually, more likely, they're going to get fed. Of course, we need to be careful not to make our follow-up turn into harassment. So we know that we have a follow-up policy, email, call, for example, and we conclude with nuclear option, like we saw in sales writing. So you need to be persistent. what I've noticed with most of the law firms is they're not doing any unsolicited pitching at all. And then the few people that are doing unsolicited pitching are just being market driven, following something happening on the market. So all of the competitors are doing the same thing. And the ones that are doing spontaneous pitching are not doing a follow-up table. They are not doing like a follow-up cat. And so their responses are much less than they could otherwise be. So that's I kind of went over time again a little bit. I've put together a thing which I call the 24 best pitch elements checklist. I got so frustrated seeing all of these different pitches and documents from different law firms, which are all basically generic and more or less the same thing. They have different branding, but they have the same kind of biographies and testimonies and all the rest of it. The only thing that changes slightly might be the pricing page. That's really, really bad. I created a document called the best pitch elements checklist, where I took, from a sales perspective, a dozen of the best concepts to include, such as a deadline. That's one of them. There's another 11. And also the practical elements, another dozen. I put this all together. So if you're interested in discussing the 24 best pitch checklist and applying that for your law firm, I think this could be a good idea. Because let me be provocative. I don't think that your pitches really differ that much from your competition. You cannot compete in price. You mustn't compete in price, and it'll be catastrophic to try and do that. You cannot compete in quality, especially either, because it's very hard to measure the quality of legal services. So what can you do? I can tell you. So we have the 24 best pitch elements checklist. If you're interested in that, drop me an email and we can set up a call. We can discuss it further. And then lastly, just before I finish for today, here's an updated list of the different cities and places I'm going to be in the next up to the end of March. So today I'm joining you from Athens, where we had the technical issues. Tomorrow I'm in Bucharest. I have the Baltic tour next week, some other visits during the month. And in March, we have the Mediterranean tour. So I'm going to be around a lot of Central and Eastern Europe and Iberia and Italy. If you recognize me in any of these cities, then, drop me a line. I'm always happy just to have a coffee. Okay. So I think we've kind of run out of time. I hope that was interesting. We looked at both solicited and unsolicited pitching. My advice is really you need to be moving more towards unsolicited pitching, and you can get some really, really good results from that, especially if compared to what most law firms are doing just now, which is pretty basic, or not doing unsolicited pitching at all. Okay, so here are my socials. There's my email, my WhatsApp. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday, hopefully without technical issues like today. Thank you very much.